Rating powers now.
I can see here going to town on
it. Hello, and are we live? We're now live. Hello, and welcome to hello, and welcome to Broadsheet on the Telly. My name is John Preposterous Ryan. You're very welcome, Broadsheet readers, commenters, any outsiders, and even the trolls. Most of you. A big welcome.
Not me.
Celebrity accountant Vanessa Foran.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, Vanessa, in Dublin. A big hello to Neil Curran, also in Dublin. Neil, hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Very well. And
glad to hear.
We're waiting for a few more and who will join us. But we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Bernard Purcell, editor of the Irish World, and he joins us live from London. He's actually getting his passport photo taken. Once he's finished that, we're going to have a chat about Brexit. Bernard, well, very welcome to the show, Bernard.
Thank you.
The last time we spoke, we were talking about the Late Late London event, the Late Late Show London event. I'm not sure whether you caught the Late Late last Friday.
I saw the coverage, and I looked at it afterwards when I saw the furore surrounding the interview with Peter Casey. But I think the same issues that arose during the interview between Ryan Tubridy and oh dear, I've just forgotten Nigel Farage's name for a moment. Were the same there. It's an entertainment format. It's stuck to a running order. They don't have the time to expand on a subject and draw somebody out. So in that tight, condensed moment, you've got this kind of illusion of being an inquisitor that Jeremy Paxman and others have sort of peddled for years, that you come across as being the hard guy rather than just allowing the conversation to take its way, let the person speak, and then come in a non-adversarial but more inquisitive way. A light entertainment format that's stuck to a rigid timetable doesn't allow for that, and Ryan Tubridy also doesn't come from that background and arguably does not have that capacity, which is not to say he's not talented at what he does, but for a weighty interview, he went into it in a very short period. You could see that the clock was ticking down. He decided he would have a go at him, and you're talking about an interviewee who clearly didn't know much about any of the subjects on which he sounded off in the first instance. So it looked discourteous, uneven, and unprofessional. In the old days, and admittedly, audiences were different, broadcasting was different, you might have opened up the conversation and it looked like a lost opportunity not to have Mary Robinson and Casey just talk about what they see as what the presidency was or could have been.
Yeah, it was funny. There was sort of an anarchy in the old days that seemed to work in the end. There was an alchemy at the end where people just sort of butted in and said their piece, and a bit like sort of a pub at the end of the night, but very Irish in its way.
And allowing people, giving them the time. I mean, two of the best political interviewers in past decades have been people like Diggy, Sean Dignan, who would not seek to be the adversary or the interlocutor. He would often have a look of kind of bemused or kind of surprised innocence, and that would draw the interviewee out. And then Mike Burns would often use silence. He started the This Week program and just let the person fill that gap with their own words.
Right. And then you had Vincent Brown, which was sort of, I suppose, effective for a while, and then entertaining, and then it became reductive in a way. That sort of the Vincent Brown.
It becomes a pantomime. The same happened with Jeremy Paxman. It happens with others because they become the show, and their ratings and their salaries are proportional.
Yeah, reflect that. So, coming to some main dish here, it's been a very busy day for Brexit, Bernard. Now, just to say, lest viewers be under any doubt, Bernard is pro Remain. Very much so.
And pro-European, yes.
Pro-European, and is having what the Germans call Schadenfreude this evening, or enjoying.
No. It's I live here, and it's despair more than anything else, and frustration. there's been generations of lies told to people here. So people have believed that they do not understand in the same way because they've been fed this mythical version of World War II. They do not understand in the same way how Europe is a project that was built to move beyond the divisions of the Second World War. But there's a fantasy that has been sold, usually by foreign press, whether it be Rupert Murdoch or the Telegraph or the Express. And a lot of people who've had decades of this and decades of falsehoods, where the like of Boris Johnson and others about rules on bananas, it has percolated. It's people. There's people who have a residual belief. They are contradictory. They have contradictory beliefs. But today, Brexit reached its most recent nadir, for want of a better word, when it became clear that Dominic Raab made an admission. He was the Brexit secretary, who only last week was trying to come the Hardshaw on the border in Ireland and insist that Britain could walk away without any consequences from any backstop agreement after 3 months. And he was swiftly undercut by both Theresa May and her deputy, David Lidington, who went in to patch up things with Simon Coveney. But he made this candid admission that he's only just realized how important the to import and export Dover and Calais are, and how busy they are, which is something people have been screaming from the rooftops, including Keir on the Courier, for quite some time now. And people, as I said to you just before we went on air, have maintained that it's been one long line from Michael Gove's "We no longer need experts" to an admission that they don't even know their own geography, and that Britain is an island and so is Ireland.
The backstop, Bernard, is a device, like an insurance device, isn't it? Like a safety net. Yes,
essentially, it's so that there is no hard border in Ireland. There had initially been a suggestion that Northern Ireland would remain within, say, the regulatory framework, so that there's no distortions on the island of Ireland. But the Democratic Unionists, whose 10 MPs are keeping Theresa May in power and are actually cozying up very much to Jacob Rees-Mogg's European Research Group, has said no, they will not have any differentiation or any distinction for Northern Ireland. Now that obviously, as many of your own subscribers and others would argue, doesn't apply to abortion, doesn't apply to same-sex marriage, doesn't apply to anything else, doesn't apply to a great many things. But when it comes to the EU, they've insisted that Northern Ireland must be treated, because they have this leverage at the moment, must be treated as the rest of the UK. So Theresa May and Ollie Robbins, her chief negotiator, and David Lidington came up with the idea of making, for a limited period of time, all of the United Kingdom within that regulatory framework, so that there's no distortions or anomalies between the Republic and Northern Ireland. Now there's a question of the most recent variant on that as well. How long should that be? And Leo Varadkar was conciliatory during the week when he said that, well, okay, we could possibly concede some kind of review mechanism, but all of the negotiations thus far have said that it has to be for something better. You just cannot have a situation in which this rule of law, this rule of regulation, is set to one side to give a distorted and unfair advantage to, in particular, the United Kingdom, with no accountability.
And explain what happened today then, Bernard.
Well, Dominic Raab was giving a speech, as I said, in which he thought he was being candid and frank, and admitted that it's all a lot more complicated than he originally thought it was, that the trade is quite interconnected, that there's quite a lot of traffic for imports and exports, which, if you'll excuse the language, brought a huge no-shit Sherlock from right across the country. David Davis did the round of interviews in which it became clear that he didn't understand the detail either. But there's a climate that's building up here to try and get some kind of breakthrough 11th hour deal, which is a reporting of it, because as I think Coveney himself said, agreement in the cabinet is not the same as agreement, but because it's been such a tortuous process for them here, they seem to think that that in itself is the deal, that it's done. They still have to sell it to everyone else and then get the withdrawal agreement.
Yeah, but just on that, Bernard, it seems sort of choreographed from now on that Monday the process begins, and by next Friday we should have a deal, or there should be a deal, deal done. Is that?
If you subscribe to the belief that this deadline must be met, and the deadline is for administrative convenience over here, because there would be particular difficulties for Theresa May to get the necessary legislation through the Commons before Christmas. And remember then, if there is a withdrawal agreement ratified, it has to be ratified throughout the rest of Europe. It could go into December. I think it's more likely that it will go into December. I think it's more likely that it could even crash into the proposed Brexit date. You're going to see people looking for an extension. There's been a huge change in sentiment here as well. There was a major poll, the first major poll since the referendum in 2016, commissioned by Channel 4 and Survation at the beginning of this week, and showed that if Brexit was to happen now, it would be something like 56% in favour of Remain.
Okay, well, can I hold you just 1 second and just say a big hello, sorry, Vanessa, to Kevin. Kevin Higgins has joined us. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Kevin.
Hi, John. I don't know if you can see. John, can you hear me?
I can definitely see and hear you. Kevin, I'm just wondering if, I think you've got the video. That's it, great. I think, Neil, perhaps if you can just, if you could just tell Kevin that I think he had his video on anyway. It was sort of making a little bit of noise there. Sorry.
Can you hear me now, John?
I can hear you now perfectly, Kevin. I'm going to come to you now in a second, if that's okay.
John, I'm in no hurry. It's fine.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Very welcome. I just wanted to say hello to you anyway. But excuse me.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Bernard.
No, that's fine. I can't even remember what I was saying.
Yeah, well, it was Brexit, so it was kind of it's usually a sort of a bit of a turn-off. I have to say, in terms of coverage of Brexit, I would be personally surprised that the poll wasn't higher, because it has just been relentlessly anti-Brexit. The coverage I know you've singled out a few newspapers, but generally speaking, BBC, for the last 2 years has been pretty relentlessly anti-Brexit. Would you not agree?
The BBC is anti-Brexit?
No, I would say that yes, I would actually, frankly.
No, I wouldn't say the BBC was anti-Brexit at all. I would say the BBC has been given quite a free ride to the likes of Aaron Banks, to Farage and others, and disproportionately so, to the extent that the Today programme on Radio 4 has lost 800,000 listeners, because people are actually turning away from the likes of John Humphreys and Sarah Sands, its producer. They're moving to perhaps the World Service and Radio 5. The BBC's main channels have not been anti-Brexit. The BBC's sort of handicapped by a rather superficial notion of balance. You'll see it on any range of topical subjects, from climate warming to Brexit, where they will have somebody who knows something about the subject, and then they will have somebody stating the contrary viewpoint, but without any particular expertise or any particular weight to their arguments, because there's no particular weighting attached.
Okay, I think the BBC is a very bad example, actually. I'll give you another example. I read music magazines like Mojo and Uncut and stuff like that. I don't actually listen to music much anymore in terms of contemporary music, but I actually I like reading about people who are obsessed with music for some reason anyway. But every single interview with any musician of any age, Brexit comes up. It's uncanny, and if it's an American musician, it'll be Trump. And similarly with the midterm elections, it wasn't really the blue wave that people expected. And in many ways, I don't think another Brexit referendum will give you the result that you would want, Bernard. Would you feel confident?
I would like competence. We started our editorial position on our paper as well. We may not actually want this. It has been decided. So let's at least look for the most competent way and the best way forward. The most anyone might hope for would be a deal almost as good as the one that Britain has and was negotiated by Major, but at a much greater cost and with greater inconvenience. But everyone from the Tory backbenches to Jeremy Corbyn insisted on triggering Article 50 straight away when they had no idea what they actually wanted. We are now at this stage where it is not entirely clear what Britain wants or even understands Brexit to entail or mean. There's been, in some of the coverage, it's been that the Europeans have outmaneuvered the Brits at every stage. The Europeans and Ireland have been consistent at all stages. They have stuck to a particular framework, and it's the cabinet and its various factions within one small clique of British public and political life, the excessive English nationalists who've ended up becoming ungovernable and who've outmaneuvered themselves. I think it will be impossible at the end of the day for Theresa May to necessarily placate the Jacob Rees-Mogg brigade, but there's enough Tory members and quite possibly a handful of Labour members who fear the idea of Brexit, and rightly so, Brexit with no deal, but rather having a deal of some sort. Yeah. And that's why Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit secretary and former DPP, has said, no, that is a false binary choice.
Well, okay, I don't want to sort of dominate the conversation with my questions particularly, but if Vanessa or if Neil would like to come in, or Kevin, if you would have say anything, Vanessa?
I was talking to some relatives there last week that are based, the old home, and they all think it's not going to happen.
They think it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, Bernard is hoping. You're hoping for that, Bernard. I mean, in fact, what is your hope? What's your dream scenario now? That there is another referendum, but how is that achieved without tearing the Tory party apart? And
you get the Dallas writers in to do the Bobby Ewing come out of the shower and pretend it was all a dream for the last couple of years.
Well, they did that here, you know that.
Yes, I do recall.
And it seemed to work. I mean,
well, that's usually used. I've been in discussions over here where people say, "Oh, yes, Little Ireland was told to vote the right way next time," but it has to be pointed out that the various points on which the anti-Maastricht, anti-Lisbon brigade at different times raised, they were addressed. They went back and had them addressed, whether it was certainly on those specifics. So, I mean, that is usually a false stick that's used to say that Little Ireland and other little countries are told to vote in a certain way that they can't express their true democratic opinion. Now, it is abundantly clear, no matter whether, I mean, people like Alan Green, the lawyer, would have been a Eurosceptic, an old-fashioned Eurosceptic, but the absolute ideological drive from a hard wing of the Tory party and the staggering levels of incompetence exhibited at the highest reaches of both the Tory and the Labour front benches.
Okay, Bernard. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt because
no, it's fine.
This is not the late. we had Mario Draghi, the president of the European Central Bank, in the Oireachtas this evening. This afternoon.
I read it,
and you'll know his predecessor Trichet wrote that letter to Brian Lennon,
yes,
threatening us.
Yes.
Now, I don't know whether you call that incompetence or the way they dealt with.
No, what they did was they actually nationalised private debt. They passed it onto the shoulders of Irish taxpayers.
So that's not incompetent, but it's immoral. So I prefer kind of bumbling Boris Johnson than drunker Juncker swilling around and Trichet and threatening us. And
we had Boris Johnson as mayor here, and his chief of staff, the late Simon Milton, despaired of his.
Well, no, I mean, look, I wouldn't particularly, but I mean, if given the choice, frankly, between Juncker or Trichet or any of these kind of extremely creepy gentlemen, Mario Draghi today, very dark, sinister. You know, we know best.
Technocrats.
Yeah, absolutely. I would frankly prefer the sort of more humane, if bumbling, politician than those characters.
Well, you could have that. You could also have a run on your economy and the euro running out, going down the drain.
Okay, but that's the definition of Project Fear right there, Bernard.
I'm not saying it's either
put up
or.
with these guys, or you know,
Would you rather
put up with this technocrat, strange kind of disconnected kind of government from abroad, from the Bundesbank, you know, essentially this odd arrangement. None of us feel very comfortable with, and we don't feel particularly
and the
proud.
best bulwark for a long time was having Britain there, which is what France wanted. Why France wanted Britain there for a long time as a bulwark against Germany. And Britain and Ireland actually complemented each other within that single market entity that Margaret Thatcher was very enthusiastic about bringing about.
I know, but you guys go talk about the Brexiteers as being obsessed about the past, but you're obsessed about, like, a war will break out if we're not part of this complete union, and if we're not bound to these people, I mean, and by these people I mean Draghi, Trichet.
So you're assuming that it's one platonic form, that then it doesn't evolve beyond that. What it is a kind of corporate form of government, an supranational form of government in which sovereign governments all have say.
I know. Don't. Okay, but you can browbeat me, and that's fine. And I'll always be easily browbeaten. Don't worry. What I'm saying is just on a. So take, for instance, if I was an English fisherman, and I saw my fishing industry just destroyed, Edward Heath give it away, essentially, and then I discover sort of the grounds that are the basis on which Edward Heath was giving this stuff away, and his own personal compromises that he was making. And I would feel, well, that was a pretty bad deal. Our industry is gone. I'm not a little Englander. I love my country, and living on an island, you need your fishing rights.
Have you looked at the fishing statistics? It's actually dominated by a couple of families, a couple of very, very large families who own the rights there. The notion of the small fisherman is false. Patrick Minford, the right-wing economist, has last week said that Britain has to run down its automotive industry and treat it in much the same way it treated the mines and various other traditional industries.
Okay. Well, I mean, they're not all Crombie coat-wearing Brexiteer. You know, they're not all these little Englanders you portray them as. In the same way as the Trump voters are not all redneck racists. And
I didn't say anything about the Trump voters.
I mean, the caricature over the last couple of years has been a strange one.
Have you ever seen a UKIP gathering? And it's the UKIP vote that was co-opted by a branch of the by a branch of the Conservative Party, and it's what part of the Labour Party was looking for. But but
that's gone to the extreme.
Of UKIP is real.
Yeah, but that's the extreme of that of a movement that's so broad. It's a broad church, the Brexit church. You know that too.
No,
a lot of Irish people voted for Brexit. They must have, in fact, Bernard, going by the statistics.
Of course they did, because Irish people in this country vote exactly the same way as everybody else. I think I've mentioned before that there was an attempt to try and hypothecate an Irish vote, and that was done as far back as 1992. But Irish people will vote on exactly the same lines as their neighbours and other people here. So you can't really differentiate. Although we, amongst, say, the community, the people who are, say, more visible in the community, they would have been pro-Remain, not least because it has improved relations between the two countries so much, and they have lived through a different time.
Okay. In the same way as America kind of learning to live with Trump, I mean, would you learn to live with Brexit, or will you fight to sort of remain in the Union, or for Britain to remain in the Union, Bernard?
I don't have any say in it other than my vote. I mean, when you have the leader of the opposition has completely surrendered that position, and on the day after the vote, they said, yes, let's have Article 50 without a thought as to how or what Brexit should be. So if Brexit is in all likelihood going to happen, even though I was among the 700,000 people who marched in London a couple of weekends ago, and it should be noted that the BBC, taking in your earlier point, gave equal coverage to a meeting up in the north of England with Farage, where I think less than 1,000 people attended.
Okay. Okay. Anybody want to come in? Sorry, I didn't really mean it to get so heated, Bernard. But
it's not heated.
John is in his element talking about Brexit.
No, not at all, Bernard. No, but I don't mean heated. I think it's you feel passionate about it. That's basically.
I'm just being logical and analytical about it. I live here.
I know.
It's like seeing your neighbour's house catch fire and nothing is being done about it. It is. I know plenty of people who have repeated the arguments of Brexit, and then when you actually step through it, they become, oh, I didn't quite realize that. It's the same. I mean, I've spent more than 30 years explaining Northern Ireland, Irish politics and the border to well-intentioned but misinformed people here. So it's not a question of being a zealot.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't describing you as a zealot, but I do think that you're very, you know, you're very pro-Remain, and that's fine. Vanessa, can somebody, Kevin, somebody?
I'm certainly interested in what Bernard says, and I wouldn't suggest that Bernard was a zealot on the Remain side.
No.
Excuse me. I think perhaps he is anti-chaos and anti-complete anarchy, which seems to be the alternative to any kind of reasoned and methodical withdrawal by the UK. My own view, which is very firmly held over a long period of time, is that the EU, as it's presently constituted, or as it has evolved over the past, into the number of 27 over the past 20 years, is that it is inherently unstable anyway. And it reminds me a little bit like the old Austria-Hungary Empire, which took just one incident in Sarajevo to cause all of Europe to implode. I think already, for instance, Bernard may not be aware of this, but the Irish courts are refusing to extradite people to both Austria and Hungary on the basis that the Irish court takes the view and has sought the opinion of the European courts that people's fundamental rights are not guaranteed by the current regimes, political regimes in Hungary and Austria. And that's undoubtedly the case, that European law of fundamental rights guaranteed under our membership of the EU are being ignored. Austria itself as a country is a myth. And back as far as the Anschluss, Hitler was quite correct. Austrians, by and large, do regard themselves as Germans.
Okay.
And it is an absolute nonsense to think that fascism has disappeared. It is not. It has been on the rise.
And unlike Germany, it's never apologized for its Nazi past.
Indeed, indeed. In fact, it celebrated its history by electing Kurt Waldheim as its president, who served as an SS officer.
Well, he was also UN Secretary General as well, Kevin.
He was, but then again, we elect all sorts of lunatics to all sorts of positions of power all over the world, of which we have daily.
But Kevin, if I may, rather than suggesting that the European Union, which is flawed, I'm not even going to pretend that it's not, that it is in some way a petri dish for fascism, or that it's in some kind of terminal decline, you have to keep in mind that it's, first of all, a noble aspiration, that in our living memory, within the space of a few years, former dictatorships, Greece, Spain, Portugal, they joined, and that was for the better. There was probably a haste to suspend the same principles we're talking about, to bring the kleptocracies in, and we're seeing that with Orban and others now. And we saw the transfers of money that were just used to line the pockets of corrupt governments, but people turned a blind eye, and anybody who attempted to criticize the decisions, they were silenced and ostracized by the EU apparatchiks. But by the same token, leaving aside the tensions, and you as a jurist and as a legal expert would know that there's always going to be a certain tension between the kind of civil code that you will have in the non-common law countries, and then you have our common law tradition in Ireland, in Britain, in North America, and former Commonwealth countries. That tension will bring things like the European Convention on Human Rights, which was a British initiative under Churchill, and some very, very noble successes. It's just when people are encouraged to look away from, as you say, Austria, and we did have this problem with Austria 20 years ago as well, but also the very, very serious waiving of fundamental rights in Poland, in Hungary, the institutionalized anti-Semitism, and that Irish judge has been leading a very, very admirable fight for those rights that we take so seriously.
Okay, Vanessa, as a Dagenham-born Irish woman, you must have a view on this. How would you vote? You would vote Remain, presumably, in a referendum if there was another referendum. Oh, we can't.
Sorry, folks. Sorry, sorry, John. If I was living there, I don't know how I would vote. I'll be honest with you. Okay, but if the fact that I'm here, I do believe Europe is good for Ireland, and what John is nodding. I think we're better in than out anyway. I'm not sure. The whole Brexit, when it was put to the electorate in the UK, I actually don't think it was explained properly anyway. So now you're saying it's if the vote was taken again, Bernard, it would be 56 Remain.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there was an opinion poll commissioned, the biggest opinion poll of its kind since 2016 by Channel 4 and Survation earlier this week, and it was indicative that there had been a change
so it's
in
still
established positions.
Marginal. It's still
no 56 to 48 is not marginal.
Yeah, but you've it's not 60-40, like it's not 70-30. Do you know what I mean? It's
but
Bernard,
it's still not convincing.
My point about there being so much publicity, or I feel that the coverage has been very anti-Brexit in the last couple of years, a bit like anti-Trump, and I'm surprised that I would have expected it to be a little bit more than that. But
again, the only cephalogist who has actually come out of the polls in recent years with any kind of credibility is Professor Curtis, John Curtis, who went against the established received wisdom in predicting the last two general election results and giving some indication of how the last the referendum might go. So I'm not talking about wishful thinking. The reality is that the 29th of March is the Brexit date. A comprehensive and sensible withdrawal agreement needs to be struck in that time, but there is strong ideological opposition to having any kind of ordered departure from the EU. More mainstream opinion would outweigh that. There would be more people who would look for some kind of sensible compromise and a continuing sensible trading relationship. There's been a couple of attempts at Project Fear, but there has been very, very incompetent preparation for this. I mean, the Irish officials were preparing for it 2 years ago. We're only now beginning to see position papers. Admittedly, from it's been argued that that is to panic people, but it has not been understood, the sheer level of interconnectedness of modern globalized trade and relations between financial services, import, export, even just in time.
But I think my point is that I think it has been. I mean, I read the papers every single day because it's part of the thing we do here, and every single day I've read warnings about all this. Every single day for 2 years.
Yes, and not a penny.
I mean, it has been relentless. No, I'm not talking about pennies being dropped. This is like every day in the financial pages, every day in the world news pages, every day. I mean, it has just been relentless.
And the counter to that is the Brexit secretary's admission that he had no idea it was so complicated. It's like Donald Trump saying he had no idea healthcare was so
I
complicated.
know, but I think you're jumping on a gaffe there rather than a genuine error or genuine mistake. I mean, I think the problem has been, and I think I see it with the Casey people as well, the belittling of the other side in this way hardens their stand, I believe, and actually it seems to have solidified the Trump vote, for instance, in America. And I would say that there's a hardened Brexit vote now that won't budge. You know,
there's no doubt about that.
But they could have been more.
But it's not the majority vote.
Yeah, but not if one treats them as if they're kind of imbecilic, kind of little, you know, bowler-hatted. Sorry, Vanessa.
Sorry if you don't mind. You mentioning about the media coverage of Brexit, and I mean, they're not prepared for it, and they haven't done a deal. And you were talking about Derek Davis. Derek Davis. Sorry, geez, David Davis. I remember at the time he said, "Oh, we'll have a deal done in no time." It was no problem. It wasn't going to be a big deal. That that they pretty much had the smarts to do it, and clearly they haven't. But the media thing, my fear is, and I think John is touching on that, is they just don't like the people involved on the Brexit side, from Farage to Rees-Mogg to Ewan Hopkins, So I think it was more of a belligerence because they didn't like the personalities rather than, trying to avoid a bias. Had as much to do with it, I think. And John is saying that, going back to about not believing the people were able to think for themselves. And I find that a lot here as well. They underestimate the electorate. And I know you think 56% Remain is convincing. I don't.
No, I said that opinions have changed from something that was split in the space of 2 years, something that was held to be a monolithic, unchangeable split. That has changed. There has been a significant change in both. There are some, although not to the same extent, there are some Remainers who thought, right, let's embrace Brexit and depart. And there are a great many who now, when they're actually confronted with the practical realities of it. I mean, if you look at the lost economic growth in the last 2 years alone, if you look at the fact that you've got fairly rapacious and mercenary private enterprise or private capital, venture capital firms like Carlyle, I was going to say Carlyle, the Carlyle Group, they're putting a brake on anything. If you look at the construction industry post-Carillion, there's nothing happening until after March.
I agree with you, Bernard. I would like to say I never thought I'd get so passionate about Brexit. Frankly, we've avoided it on this show. I hope I didn't insult you there. I hope I wasn't too aggressive or anything like that with you. I didn't mean.
Look, John is just dying to talk about it because we wouldn't let him all this time.
Well, yeah, I do feel that there. Yeah, I'm looking at a more sort of a general sort of disposition among, the way an opponent is treated in the political sort of arena these days.
I strongly suggest that you perhaps have one of these sessions with, say, Nadine Dorries, Derek Davis, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and a few of them, and then at the end,
come on the show,
if you still hold. Well, I think one or two of them would come on anything. Certainly, Nadine would.
But John, apart from sort of the kind of uncivil political debate in which one side is disparaged, Bernard very kindly talks about incompetence, and you talked about the way in which certain people on one side were treated as if they were imbeciles. But quite frankly, you have to come to the realization that people like Rees-Mogg, Boris, Gove, and quite a few of the others, they are in fact imbeciles. Look, they really are.
Yeah, but Kevin, nobody's talking about.
They're utterly barking.
Nobody is talking about these old Etonian guys who are just running amok. We're talking about people who genuinely do not like the EU, do not want to be part of the EU, and would rather be part.
I'm one of those.
Okay.
I don't like the EU as it is presently constituted.
Okay.
And I certainly
just because
the area in which it's developing.
Yeah,
But
just because
I certainly would, if you're going to open Pandora's box, John, you should at least have a butterfly net to try and catch what's coming out. And the British have not done that.
okay, well, you've got the same guys who did Suez. I mean, these are like as John le Carre said, these are the guys I taught in Eton, and they blew Suez up, and then they're responsible for this kind of calamity. But
yeah, it's the challenge. They Amalgam Boris, and they come from a culture that they're not used to being challenged.
Well, Rees-Mogg will make a lot of money.
You know, from the likes of us, you know what I mean? Or even in the media, they're reared in that culture, I suppose. But the one thing I actually, Bernard, if you don't mind, John, if I just get kind of, this was always intrigued me is, you know, Theresa May and Corbyn, they all voted they all backed the Remain vote, you know.
Corbyn didn't.
And Theresa May was as well, no?
No, Corbyn didn't. Corbyn went missing in action.
Yeah, but the Labour Party had
the Labour Party did, but Corbyn actually absented himself. It's not like the 1975 referendum where Harold Wilson actually allowed the cabinet to take particular positions according to their conscience. Corbyn, who is heavily advised by Seamus Milne, has a long-standing antipathy to the European project, which he would see as neoliberal, and has always been anti. He, as I said, on the day after said, right, that's it, now let's start the clock. Now, the party had tactically been hoping to harvest some of those neo or potential UKIP votes in various constituencies. But another survey was published last week that showed that amongst all of those Labour constituencies, even where they were Leave constituencies, Labour voters were Remain.
But Bernard, don't you, sorry, Vanessa. Please.
Sorry, just that Theresa May herself was Remain.
She was Remain.
Yes, but but when the vote came in, suddenly she was all for Brexit. You know, correct. Brexit. It was almost like she was only halfway there. Did they see that? I think that's why they haven't been able to get a deal. There's been no real commitment, or nobody seems to know what they don't even know. Well, they come across it. They don't even want to know what's going on.
Well, they don't know if she'll be around to deliver it to a certain extent.
They say that. It said the same about Merkel, and I know now she's stepping down as leader, but do you know they're still there?
Yes, and she's got some bright. Liddington and Ollie Robbins have been particularly bright, and a number of those who would be who would want not so much the Remainers now as including Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, whom she had briefed she wanted to fire, but she called such a disastrous general election she wasn't in a position that she could fire him. They are being seen as the Remainers, or the people who want the soft Brexit. I mean, there's all sorts of terminology that you can use, but the reality is if you look at the sheer number of international treaties that they're talking about, they out of something like 375, I think they've got through about 5.
Okay.
John, just
sorry, Neil.
Sorry.
Just to throw in, because you're the media guru, so you can say what you want about that. But just in terms of economic performance with the UK, I mean, their exchange rate with euro has been for the last nearly 2 years. It's been hovering around the 1.15. It's great for us, but if you throw back to maybe 3 years ago, and it was nearly €1.45 for a pound sterling. So it's great for us for going to the UK, but also like their economic growth for Britain, while their employment rate levels or unemployment rate levels are better than Ireland, economically though they're kind of rock bottom in terms of they're just above Italy and when compared with other G7 nations in terms of economic growth, and of course there's jobs that are being hemorrhaged, not to the extent that was expected in London, and consumer sentiment still remains quite low. So whatever about the media, being extremely pro-Remain or whatever, money doesn't lie, and it paints a pretty grim picture.
Well, it paints us as 4.5% growth for next year, but that, is that does our economy need more growth? I mean, it seems to have been overheated, if anything, in the last year or so. Anyway, look, That's probably for.
We don't have capacity at the moment.
I was wondering though, Bernard, could you humor us? Could you humor us for a moment? Because we're fond of an old conspiracy theory or two here on Broadsheet, and we were wondering if we could ask it. Well, when I say we, I mean I. But if you could just humor us, do you think on March 29th, if no deal is reached, could this potentially be the beginning of the end of the United Kingdom as we know it? Could that be a future that the tinfoil hat wearers could be talking about?
You mean us invade?
I mean, could we see like a massive political upheaval? Scotland sees an opportunity to play hardball with Westminster. Northern Ireland trying to fight their own corner with Ireland on their side, United Ireland. Is that something that is being even whispered about?
It's been for 2 years. People have been talking about how Cameron ushered in the potential breakup of the United Kingdom, and Scotland is governed by a party that wants independence. I mean, Cameron, in a fit of hubris, was prepared to just roll the dice in the Scottish referendum, and some very, very heavy intervention was required towards the end of that debate to ensure. I was thinking of something a little bigger guns than that, but that. And it did look as if it could actually go in a direction that would not necessarily have been to Scotland's economic benefit, but the vote spoke for itself. A lot of people were quite conservative about staying within the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland has, while everybody wanted to bring the extremes into the centre, and hence we brought Sinn Féin and the DUP into government, you had 10 years of what amounted to balkanisation, carving it up very nicely between themselves, and a stagnant political life with all the other parties sort of just frozen out or dead on the vine. So the end result now is that the people calling the shots for Northern Ireland don't even represent what the popular vote was on Brexit. But what has worked for Sinn Féin is now going away from pitching the possibility of an all-Ireland Ireland that would exist within Europe, whereas opposed to, say, a narrow insular Catholic state. So that has brought some of the more middle of the road SDLP voters voting on nationalist lines that they never would have before. And I have spoken to, say, traditional UUP families who loathe and detest everything about the DUP, who lost their petition of concern in the last election. They had a fairly disastrous turnout from their point of view, so they couldn't believe their luck when things happened as they did in Westminster. Of course, it is possible that you could see the breakup of the United Kingdom. I certainly wouldn't rule it out. But these kind of things, they never happen overnight. Even the Berlin Wall didn't happen overnight. The optics made it look that way, but it was decades of attrition.
Can I just interrupt you there, Bernard? Sorry, and introduce Lucky Kambula. Lucky, hello, Lucky.
Hello, Joe.
Hello,
Lucky.
Hello, Lucky. It's been so long since we've seen Lucky. How are you, Lucky? Lucky is with the group Maasai, the movement of asylum seekers in Ireland.
That's correct.
Lucky, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you.
Had so many missed connections. You were supposed to be on so many times, and
yeah,
we couldn't get you. But you're very welcome back on the show. How is Arklow?
No, Arklow is cool. Arklow is cool.
Oh, you like Arklow now? Okay.
Yeah.
We were complaining that there was, apart from the pottery, there was nothing to see in Arklow, and then we realised the pottery was closed. It shut down some time ago. But you're enjoying it down there, are you?
Yeah.
You're enjoying it down there.
Yeah. I'm enjoying Arklow. It's a nice part of the country.
Lucky, we were talking about the Brexit, and
yeah, I listened to you guys. Yeah,
I know.
That is the happiest John has been in a long time.
It's not actually. It was the most, upset I got. I don't know why I got upset, but I think it was sort of like a kind of cumulative feeling about that. We were emboldening oppositions by the way we were maybe regarding them.
Yeah.
They were a bit more nuanced than, I don't know, than than we make out. Anyway, Lucky, I'm going to come to you in a second. I wanted briefly just to talk to Kevin about the resignation today of Paul Redmond from the Mother and Baby Homes Collaborative Group, which was set up by Minister for Children, Catherine Zappone, which is headed up by a civil servant called, I think, Gerard Kearney. And this is to go through the options that the survivors want in terms of redress and memorialization of the two mother and baby homes, of the mother and baby homes generally. But Paul Redmond resigned today. He said that he'd been basically tricked, and Minister Zappone had let him down and the survivors down. Kevin, could you elaborate a little bit about what happened?
I mean, forgive me, but if you tracked me across media over the past 2 years, or from the day that that Zappone took office, you will find me saying exactly that. You will notice that on the morning of the 23rd, or in the afternoon of the 23rd of last month, Catherine Zappone announced that there would be an excavation and an exhumation of the bodies at Tuam, but announced at the same time that they would require legislation. Now, if you go back to, I think probably the first Sunday in June last year, and go to, as you will find it online, RT's This Week program on the Sunday, you will find in the course of an interview with John Burke, I expressed the view as firmly as I could that the government did not have the power or the legal capacity to excavate. We sent somebody in to meet him on the 22nd of October, the night before the announcement, and we asked him 3 or 4 times if they had ever received advice from the Attorney General that they could do this. And he hummed and hawed, but ultimately, after a good deal of gibberish, he said that probably they would need new legislation. So essentially, what Paul Paul's realization is probably based on the fact that he now accepts that in the case of Tuam, the only way in which Tuam will be excavated is when the government has enacted legislation to dispense with the need for an inquest.
Yes.
I find Paul's language to be actually temperate. I would have used perhaps much more strong language. I have used stronger language in respect of Zappone. Okay. And our response immediately after that announcement was that her decision was a vile and callous one, and Paul has echoed that today. It is vile and callous. It is, in a sense, it is a conspiracy, and in my view, a criminal conspiracy, to conceal the actual truth of Tuam and of the other mother and baby homes. And Paul, I regret Paul put himself through that for the past year, and he's expressed that regret that he didn't listen to other people when he was invited to join.
Yeah, he said he wished he'd listened to Derek Leinster as well. Yeah,
correct. This is precisely what he said. Now, in fact, just before the
sorry, can I just say who Derek Leinster is?
Zappone.
Yeah, Derek. Sorry, Kevin. Derek is with the Bethany Homes Group, which is the Protestant home, and they were not included for some extremely bureaucratic reason. But sorry, go on, Kevin.
And unjustifiable reasons. There is no justifiable reason for their exclusion. And Derek's personal history is an extremely moving one. But yes, I don't know why. I mean, conspiracy theories are one thing. I think Zappone offered to take on this poison chalice to stay in cabinet when there was a change of regime at the top with the ending of Kenny's reign. That said, dear Leo, who else will take this shit on, and I will sort it out. A deal has been done in the case of Tuam with the Bon Secours. Prone was involved in that. The figure of 2.5 million was out there at the same time as she went running up to the Pope with her little note. That figure of 2.5 million was known to me prior to that, prior to the announcement on the 23rd.
Yeah.
It is criminal. We can't allow it to happen. And if I can just introduce a lighter note, John,
sure.
or perhaps a lighter note. You know that horrible moral dilemma, you know, that I used to listen to Michael Burke on Radio 4 in the morning, the Moral Maze.
The Moral Maze, yeah.
That was in the days when I used to listen to the Today Bernard. I no longer do.
Right.
You know, this terrible sort of dilemma. You're standing on a riverbank at a mill race or something, and you've got 2 children, your own 2 children are in there, and you can only save one. And what do? Well, if Prone Fitzgerald in the comedy home, if Prone Fitzgerald and Zappone were in there, I know what I'd do.
I'm afraid. Don't say it. Don't say it.
I would take a long walk down to the Nag's Head and order a pint and consider what my options were.
Yeah,
that's the nicest way I can put it.
I have to say, I was reading the minutes of the forum, the collaborative forum today. There's only been 2 meetings, in fact, so it doesn't sound as impressive, or sounds more impressive than it actually was. But the language that is used in terms of the victims and the survivors is incredibly ornate and very difficult to read, in fact, and kind of almost. This is the
one who quoted Proust to survivors. I mean, remember that.
I know, and there is that element of it. You do feel that there's a kind of a new agey storytelling. We'll do this through storytelling, and it's not going to, it's very much a bit like the McAleese report into the Magdalens. Let's focus on the let's hear the victims, but meanwhile, we'll screw the victims because,
incidentally, she couldn't give away places on that collaborative forum. Ultimately, anybody who applied would say, "Oh, thank you very much. We'll have you on board." I mean,
but there's some great people on it. I mean, there's some very good people on it in terms of.
Sure, Jeff Shannon's a great guy, but we didn't need any damn report from Jeff Shannon. There was nothing Jeff Shannon told us about what needs to be done in respect of Tuam or anywhere else. It all speaks for itself. But 18 months ago, the meeting, one of the meetings of the Tuam Network that Catherine attended at that time, she announced that Catherine Zappone had invited her to join this forum. And she openly asked people for advice, and then she turned to me. I was sitting beside her or next to her, and she asked me, what did I think? I said, Catherine, I think the minister would prefer to have you inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. That was exactly what she was doing. Zappone kept Catherine Corliss close.
Yeah,
very close to all those processes. None of the survivors groups had the contact regularly with Zappone that Catherine Corliss had. And in my view, Catherine Corliss, and this does not reflect badly on her, because we all know what we owe her, she was used. What that deal last week, or announced on the 23rd, the only thing that Zappone really wanted that day was Catherine Corliss's endorsement.
Yes.
And for 3 weeks, the guy who runs that mid-morning program on Galway Bay FM, Keith Finnegan, I had put certain questions to Zappone. He tried for 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks on. The day after that announcement made, she goes on and does a double act with Keith Finnegan for as long as he wanted. everybody's been sold a bill of goods on this. And in a way, I feel Catherine Corlett certainly has been misused. And I think possibly she's coming to that conclusion. And there's absolutely no doubt that Paul Redmond's language today was is nothing less than what Zapone deserves. And in my view, he, who is always prepared to collaborate and work with anybody, and whereas my journey in terms of mother and baby homes has only been over something less than 5 years now, Paul's journey has been his lifetime.
Yes.
Because he is a child of the Castle Pollard home. And he has informed himself and worked extremely hard on this for perhaps 20 years.
Yeah, I must recommend his book. The Adoption Machine is incredibly detailed. It gives you a good picture of what's happened and what's to come. Really,
yeah,
it's a foretaste of the scandals to come, the adoption scandals that are to be told.
But it is, as Bernard, I think, remarked the last time he was on, it's a war of attrition. They want as many possible as survivors and witnesses and families simply to die. They really do want that.
Yes.
It's delay, delay, delay. I do not accept the bona fides of Zapone or this government in any way. I do not accept that they have at any time acted in good faith. I don't trust them. As I said before, I've met Catherine Zapone on a good number of occasions now, and I have generally shaken hands with her. But I advise anybody else who finds themselves in that position to count their fingers afterwards. And I really do mean that.
Kevin, is it possible, and just for giving, so in the spirit of conciliation that John likes when we have adversaries, to keep in mind that the politicians themselves might think they're doing the right thing, because if you look at the history of the Department of Justice in Ireland, in going through Magdalen laundries, going back to Ford, it does have a history of not exactly an enlightened or progressive approach. It tends to have a fortress mentality in dealing with any kind of scandal or controversy.
But you're quite right. There's nothing new in that. You only have to read. John will tell you that you only have to read the transcript of the Disclosures Tribunal to find the reticence, not reticence, but stubborn refusal
or obstruction
to admit to anything, or to even the most mundane documents to be freed. I mean, I will tell you something now that may sound terribly outlandish, and probably won't shock anybody, but in terms of the history of what was ultimately the Ryan Report, again, a deeply flawed process, and the role of the Department of Education and its delegation of its responsibility for children to various religious orders. I will tell you that there was a paedophile ring operating within the Department of Education right up to the late 1960s. There was no just we'll hand this over to the religious orders and do anything. They were hand in glove.
Yeah. And we're dealing with the legacy of that, I think, very much so at the moment. Bernard, did you want to come in here? Because I'm sure a lot of your readers are very interested in this.
Well, a lot of our readers are people who came through, as I think I mentioned before. They're of that generation because they came here in the 50s and the 60s, and including even in the 70s. And as I've said before, it's quite clear from some of the people who have come through those homes, for the most part, you can see from the level of literacy of the letters that they send, that they have broken educations, a lack of confidence. Their women tended often to want to make a break, and they would find they found people and made families, and rebuilt their lives. But I've spoken to women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who apologize for perhaps not being more articulate or not being more assertive than they are, and but also expressing gratitude that they met their husband and they had their family, but they just want some kind of validation or recognition. It's like years ago with the homes. I've interviewed young men who thought there would be some kind of route out of how they felt about themselves, and it was quite clear that for many of them that was probably never going to happen, because you had a very, very cynical, because I was working for the India at the time, but money was thrown, and a lot of that money was just hoovered up by the solicitors firms who were just looking to get in on what they saw as a bit of a bonanza. So we've seen generations of, say, our older readers making contact with us, and sometimes all they want is the opportunity to just talk and be heard. And it's not that we're offering a counseling service or anything like that, but just elementary courtesy and recognizing that these people were not the problem. They were not the villains. They were not the shadowy part of Irish society who left under some kind of cloud, but that they were the people who were in fact wronged.
Kevin, do you think the collaborative group that Paul Redmond has resigned from today, do you think that will survive?
I think it's simply, I mean, it has a budget. It's like any other state creation. It'll limp along whether or not it has a purpose or at all, or a worthwhile purpose. It will go along. It will produce a report of sorts. It in fact usurps, in my view, part of the role of the Commission of Investigation, just as indeed the so-called expert technical group usurped part of the role of the Commission of Investigation, and indeed the government now attempts to usurp the role of the Coroner's Service. It will be something that will be printed, will be available for the stationery office, and will not be worth a damn to the survivors or their families or anybody else.
The youngest survivor, I was looking it up this week. The youngest survivor from the Magdalens is, I think, into her 70s now. I mean, this really is quite pitiful now, isn't it, at this stage?
It is, of course, and there's nothing. Well, the youngest survivor of somebody who was retained in the Magdalen laundries until it closed as a resident there after it had probably functioned as a laundry, is not the youngest. In fact, a very well-known person, known to all of us, was committed there by a court in the 1970s, and that was our new one of our newest members of the Muslim community in Ireland.
Oh, okay.
You know who that is? I'm having a senior moment here. Who is the gaudiest, most controversial Irish vocalist over the past 30 years?
Most what?
He's talking about Sinead O'Connor.
Oh, Sinead. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yes.
I was trying to think of her new name, or her Muslim name. There's Shada.
Yeah.
Anyway, not sure. Sorry, Kevin.
As the electrician would say, it's just another phase she's going through. But yeah, I mean, she was committed there by the courts. I think at the age of 15. Because there was no available sort of reform school or similar place available. Because as the congregations declined in all of these places, the Dangans and the place out in Connemara and all of these places, as the orders declined, and as families, as courts were no longer sending children there in any numbers, when these places closed, the state didn't really put anything else in their place for children who had, perhaps needed secure therapeutic places. And the reason they didn't do it was quite simply because as soon as they opened one, as has happened, they'd fill up. And every existing place, Overstown, stroke Trinity House, and the various other small units, they're always at full capacity, always.
Yeah.
But Sinead O'Connor can be described as a survivor of a Magdalen laundry.
Well, Sinead O'Connor, it's funny now, 20-odd years ago, was describing the extent of child sexual abuse in Ireland, and people were just laughing at her, as if she was whatever. Kevin, can I just move on a little bit and just reintroduce Lucky? Hello, Lucky.
Hello.
How are you? Sorry to keep you waiting there, Lucky. I wanted to ask you just about the asylum seekers, the direct provision people, the employment situation. How is it now, Lucky, in terms of them getting work and getting paid and living independently now? Some of them.
Yeah, you're right. Some of them since June this year, when the new law in terms of the right to work, there has been a slow progress as far as the people who are in direct provision who are eligible. I'm not too sure if you are aware of the level of eligibility that has been given.
Yes.
That you have to be 9 months in the country and you have not received your first instance negative response on your first application, then you are eligible to work, and a permit of 6 months. There are a couple of people that are on various jobs now. But
and if you're appealing a decision, you can't get a job either.
If you have appealed the decision and you were given the right to work, you would still continue with your right to work until your case is finalized.
Okay.
But if you were given a negative and appealed before you were given the right to work, so you won't get the right to work.
Okay, so people are working now who are in direct provision for the first time.
There are very, very, very few numbers. The numbers are still low. It's about just over 200 or 300 people that are currently working in one or two jobs in very few hours that the people have. And
Lucky, are these service industries? Are any of them? I mean, what level of work is this we're talking about?
Well, the most people that I've been talking to, they are in the hotel industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the people have been there in restaurants or hotels.
Okay.
That kind of work.
And they're still living in the direct provision centres, but they've now got their own salaries. Can they cook themselves, or presumably they can get?
No.
They still can't cook.
The cooking is if you're still living in the direct provision, you are still bound to the laws and the rules of direct provision. And what happens is that if a person must declare that he has started working now, and they do a kind of an assessment of how much a person is supposed to pay if he's working and still in direct provision. So they do pay for being there, those that are working. And also those that are working then obviously will be out of the supplementary or allowance. So they will, once you work, your allowance is taken away and your clothing money is taken away. So there's a catch in terms of the fear that people have in terms of moving on, because you would think that if a person has the income, I don't know, I wouldn't know how much the income will be, could be in a situation whereby he can own. But the danger that they have, or the fear that people have, is that should the case be finalized and be a negative response, was once at the end of the case and the case is negative, then your right to work is taken away from you.
Okay.
And you lose your job.
Okay.
And the fear now is that if you moved away, the chances you'll end up being homeless.
Of course. Okay. If you get a negative
and
decision.
The final decision, if the final decision is negative, and there is a big risk that people have that fear that what will I do if I get a negative?
Yes, of course. And I mean, the hotel jobs and stuff like that probably wouldn't be enough to pay for a rent. But if they were to get enough together for a rent, they could move out of the direct provision centre. Would they have to register with the Foreign Office? I mean, is there any restrictions on their movement in terms of where they can stay?
No.
Even those under currently being appealing and stuff.
No, there's no restriction as to where the person. If a person, for instance, let's make an example. If a person lives in a center in Monaghan, for instance, and gets a job in
Cork,
Dublin, let's say Dublin, all right, and a person can decide that, okay, I just move permanently to Dublin and leave the center, and you are allowed to do that, and you just change your address from the application, from the IPO, to let them know now that you are living in this address, so that you can get your correspondence there. So yeah, people are allowed to do that. There's nothing prohibiting people from doing that.
Now this
what I just want to mention as well is the fact that even though there is the right to work, and very few people are eligible to that, but there is a chunk of people who have been longer in the country, in the system, who, according to this definition of this right to work, are still not allowed to work, which means they will still stay longer, depending on the state, in direct provision. And it's something that we feel it needs to be changed to have that balance in terms of because we would want people to, if we were talking about a direct provision or the end of direct provision, it will mean that people must be able to take care of themselves and move out of there.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. This was an EU directive as opposed to an Irish decision.
Yes.
So good on the EU for that decision. But
isn't it the Dublin Convention that governs it? Wasn't it a Dublin presidency? And wasn't it Brian Lenihan Jr., who was the minister responsible at the time, who drove this through?
Okay. Well, I'll have to bow to your greater wisdom on that subject. So thanks to Dublin, Lucky, that that this is happening for some of the you're having the right to work. Lucky, just about your own personal circumstances. How is everything with you? Is life good?
Yeah, with me, it's all good. I'm doing two things. I'm campaigning on the other side, and I'm working now full time in Dublin. I'm commuting between Dublin and Arklow every day.
Okay.
So it's all good. It's all good for me, and I'm a story that motivates people that you can be able to survive direct provision and live a normal life. And
how long is that commute, Lucky?
Yeah, it's strenuous.
How long is that? Like an hour and a half, 2 hours?
It's 2 hours or 2 hours and more, and more because of the traffic in the mornings. I leave the house at 5:30 6:30, 6:15.
Wow.
To be in Dublin at 9. I'll be on the road for almost 2 hours or more.
That's crazy.
In the morning, then in the evening, I wait until the traffic, is movable. It's moving. Yeah, it is. It is what it is.
It is what it is. But I'm very sorry. But at least you're living in the most beautiful part of the world, Arklow. Let's face it.
Yeah. No, I'm not complaining about the place. The place is fine. And if I want peace and tranquility, Arklow is the place to be. Yeah. Peacefully, I can be able to. The day, maybe I have maybe one day to rest over in a week. Because most of the time I'll be working, and then evenings I'm addressing various meetings in various places.
Lucky. I realize that a lot of the direct provision people probably don't even celebrate Christmas, but we give a lot around this time of the year. I remember we were talking, and you mentioned that phone cards were really like a valued item.
Oh yes.
I mean, could we do up some sort of appeal for this Christmas to get anybody? I mean, if I had a phone card and I had credit on it, would that?
Yes, I mean any phone card voucher with a credit, any credit in all these networks, Irish networks, will be really welcome by people. Okay. Whether it's a $5 or a $10, it's a much welcome.
Okay.
People can phone home,
Okay.
Any small little thing help.
Okay, well, we'll get on to that. I just want to introduce, say hello to Olga, Lucky, an old friend of Lucky's. Hello, Olga.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Just join us. Hello, Olga. We've lost Neil, so we don't have the three movies of the week.
Actually, speaking of movies, or I was just going to ask Lucky, did you see the new show that's on every Sunday night? It just started last Sunday, Taken Down.
Well,
have you seen it?
I just watched it now, just before when I came home now. I just watched it now because I never had a chance to check it. I just watched it, and to me, if I look into that's the first episode, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, to me, there's no surprise in terms of that life. The only thing that there's one thing there, the guards, when they're doing that investigation, there's one thing that is always a problem as far as I am concerned in direct provision. That is the marking of the register for the people.
Say that again, sorry.
The marking of the register for in the direct provision center is one of the things that is so dehumanizing when you are in direct provision.
So this is signing in and signing out.
Signing in, and the movie is like portraying the importance of signing by that investigation,
Yeah.
And it's something that we don't like to see. We don't like to be monitored and be registered and
like probation.
That we don't want to see that happening in the centers.
And
the movie is portraying that the importance of that, which the guards use when they do whatever investigation it is. I didn't like that at all. It can be emotional at times, especially to people that have not lived that life. So I look at it from a person that has experienced that life completely from, they tried to portray that the life of the people in direct provision. And I think a person that doesn't know will have at least an idea of what's happening in direct provision by these episodes. I don't know the next episodes, how will it be?
I think it's every Sunday.
Every Sunday. Yeah, every Sunday, Lucky.
Okay. Yeah, I'll whenever I have time listen or watch back and stuff like that. I'll see.
What's it like? What's it like seeing direct provision portrayed on in a drama like that?
Well, it is what it is. The mother there, the mother is that is the life of the mother, that is a single mother trying to comfort their kids, trying to control and raise the kids in direct provision. It shows the challenges that mothers have when they have kids, especially the teenagers, and you're trying as well to as a mother, you try by all means to be a role model and to say things will be okay. But the longer the time a person stays in direct provision, the more the hope disappears as to whether person. You can see there that the mother is afraid of being sent back home, and that is the life of a person in direct provision. When you stay longer, you don't get the response. You wonder what the response will be. Are you going to be sent back home or what? It doesn't matter which country that you're coming from. So when you have those thoughts in your head that you don't want to be sent home because you know what you went through when you left home. So those are a person lives in fear. So it also portrays that in the movie, a person that is living in fear.
Living in fear, yeah. I meant to ask. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you there, Olga. But there was a story this today about an asylum seeker became pregnant following a relationship with this security guard at a direct provision centre. She resolved her High Court action over refusal by the Registrar General to register the boy with his father's surname on the child's birth certificate. Are you familiar with that story? Sorry,
I'm not, sadly. I saw the tweet from Courts Ireland, but I haven't actually seen any copy on it. But I was just thinking, looking from the show. So without, I don't know who's seen it here, or who will see it. So I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But
this show is called Taken Down. It's on RT and it's on Sunday nights.
Taken Down,
people
RT, and it's 9:30. People Who Made Love Hate, Stuart Carlin, and Joe Spain. But without giving away too much, there's two deaths. You see two deaths of people who are in direct provision. Now one takes place outside the centre, it looks like, but there's another inside. And again, I don't want to spoil, but let's say one is a suicide. I'll just say that. And I just thought it was interesting, or sorry, not interesting, but I just wonder. Obviously, I think it already has kickstarted a debate, amongst people, because people have it gives some insight into life in direct provision for people who don't really have much, who just wouldn't know or mightn't even read newspapers, but they watch TV. So, but I just thought it might even spark debate, and even kind of this is a Department of Justice thing, and I know you guys were probably talking about the mother and baby homes, but this is 2018 now, and we, as far as I'm aware, most of the kind of refugee charities and groups, advocacy groups, have been raising concerns about deaths within direct provision and not knowing what causes some of those deaths, and even the recording of the number of suicides. And it's I was just wondering, is there a hope that possibly, even from the Maasai group, that this will, because of the conversation, it'll hopefully, by shedding light, it'll make people maybe call for more light on what's going on.
I think it will do that, because as you rightfully say, there has been deaths about, I would say, 4 or 5 this year already in direct provision, and there's been 2 in the last month, 2 suicide attempts in direct provision. That's the reality, and the show is trying to bring forth the real life of how people live in direct provision. I hope it can also because there are people that have got a negative. There's a lot of negativity that people are not even supposed to be there. You know, people don't believe that they are supposed to be there. You know, I hope there will be a debate, a really healthy debate in terms of this is what is happening now. You see, when you look into what happened some years ago with the mother and baby, and whereby people didn't have the opportunity to do what is happening now.
Yes.
And this show is an opportunity for people to see what is happening now.
And for the last 20 years, you know, because it's been there since 2000. So yeah.
Exactly. So it will enhance the work that we already do to bring forth as what is happening, because this is what we have been saying is happening. No, when now there's shows like this that will portray this the way that it is, and there is, to me, there is no exaggeration. I know it's a drama, but there is no exaggeration of what is happening. In fact, there's more that is happening to what they portrayed. Okay. You know, so the truth is good in that way. It's really it's an opportunity, and it's good, and it's gonna be archived. And when people are starting to say sorry in years to come,
exactly.
they have an opportunity to say sorry now and change things now.
Exactly.
Yeah. The
because Catherine McGuinness was, I think, the first person to say, I think the former Supreme Court judge was the first person to say a couple of years ago that this would be the Magdalens of the future, and now everyone says that. So it's like, I think,
exactly.
Well, you can see how we're dealing with.
Quite shameful, isn't it? Living through this.
Well, yeah, it is actually.
It's striking as well.
Because we're not afraid of authority, you know. Joe, like in the Magdalene days, people were afraid to challenge, and whereas we shouldn't be. Well, I'm not afraid, so it's kind of shameful, kind of putting the two together and wondering, what do we do? What can you do? Or
but in both cases, I would think Vanessa and Bernard would agree, and probably Kevin would agree, and Olga too. In both cases, it's the civil service here that seem to be making all the moves on this. I mean, it's the
making jobs for themselves, or
no? It's the civil service in the case of Minister Sapone's responsibilities. She seems to be being led by them, and I think with Department of Foreign Affairs, I think it's also there are a lot of reactionary people within the Department of Foreign Affairs that are just stubbornly refusing to accept direct provision or deal with this properly, to deal with this the system properly.
Well, sorry, Vanessa, I didn't mean to jump across you there, but I mean, there seems to be a certain cognitive dissonance when you see the politicians who go on their regular visit to the States and they do the special pleading for people without papers in the US, who there are obviously people with genuine concerns. And now celebrating the 5,000 potential visas. Yet the lack of self-awareness, or even, as I said, it's almost a cognitive dissonance. There's no self-awareness about the treatment of people who sometimes have quite horrendous stories behind them, sometimes are, by the very fact that they're seeking a different life and a different opportunity in this country, they are analogous to the people who went, but they are treated differently, viewed differently. And perhaps, one is in danger of losing sight of the fact that the TV program you were just speaking about is a drama, because I don't think Love Hate was necessarily going out of its way to take a close look at, say, inner city Dublin. But if it humanizes people who might otherwise be demonized, and if you see people as people, then we've seen this in countless we've seen it with mother and child, we've seen it with, say, people who were divorcees who used to be scarlet women, we've seen it with gay people. Once they're humanized and you recognize that they are people, that they are ordinary, real people, that can feed into a more progressive political or social attitude, and the politicians or the officials don't have the cover that they have had in the past.
Exactly.
It's a bit like during the referendum, the walk in her shoes.
Yes.
You know,
and also maybe at the next election, sorry, Vanessa, totally cutting in you. In the next election, then maybe people, when they go to their doors, you know, even if this show, like you said, humanizes the whole situation, people will maybe ask their politicians when they're looking for their vote, well, what are you going to do about direct provision? So even if it just brought it to that level of consciousness, because I guess for a lot of people in direct provision, they don't have much agency. And so it really is up to people who are privileged or in a position to have it to maybe fight for them, you know, speak up for them.
Kevin, this is the mother and baby homes of the future, or this is the Magdalens of the future?
I think it's the Magdalens and mother and baby homes of the present. I don't think it's of the future. There is another group. Now, I realize that Lucky is working with people who are in the system. When I say in the system, I mean by that, I mean they are documented. But in my view, there are probably a minimum of 20,000 very vulnerable people in this country who have fallen out of the system, fallen through the cracks, and whose status is essentially illegal. Now, that's just a statement of fact. It's not a statement, it's not a judgment on their behavior. I'm thinking, I could just, in one instance, I can think of one particular sector of the Irish economy. I won't mention what it is, but it's a very Irish industry. And it would be, if I was to give a great deal of information, it would become, many of those people would be identifiable. And some of them would be very well got and very prominent individuals. But I am aware that people who came here over the past, say, 15 years or more, and had work permits. But for one reason or another, those work permits were not renewed. They didn't have assistance, legal or other social supports. They have fallen through the cracks. They're living, to describe the existence of some of them as subsistence would be to dignify it. They are vulnerable. They are exploited. Sooner or later, I think to use it colloquially, I think there's a reluctance to pick these people up, because, quite frankly, the remand centres don't have enough room to put them in, and unless they are caught committing criminal acts, which is a very rare event, this is an open sore which is being left to bleed and perhaps fester, but it will have to be confronted. And I'm thinking of people now that I have assisted in the past, some who have even fallen off my radar and literally disappeared. They could be dead for all I know, because contacts with their own families had been lost. But there are a large, very large number. They're almost exclusively male. They'd now typically be in their mid-30s. And how they managed to continue to exist, I don't know. I don't know if Lucky, because Lucky is, as I say, dealing with people who are in the system and who are documented. I don't know if he has come across people in such a wretched condition, but they are out there.
Lucky. Oh yes, I can respond that. Thanks, Kevin, for that, and it's very, very important as well. We are actually working with a group called Justice for the Undocumented, which is exactly in that category that you just mentioned.
Yes.
And we have a joint kind of workshop next weekend, which is a Sunday, collaboration between the JFU, Mercy, and MRCI. We're trying to to match the struggles, because we see the similarities, and it's important that we don't leave people behind, and they are really, as you rightfully say, really vulnerable, because they are now undocumented. Anything just like that, a person is gone. And it's something that we are working on, and we are very much aware of it.
That's great. Maybe Kevin, you could go along to that meeting. It sounds like
I would be very glad to have details of that. I'd certainly be very happy to touch base with Lucky on that. I don't know if I can go Sunday, but certainly I would very much like to, and I would certainly like to learn more of what Lucky has told me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Olga,
I was just going to say about sorry.
Yeah, sorry. You know the number of missing minors, don't you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so Lucky probably knows this, but between 2000 and 2010, hundreds of unaccompanied minors, which is basically people under the age of 18 who would have come to Ireland unaccompanied.
Yeah.
So between 2000 and 2010, hundreds went missing. Something like over 533 went missing between those years. And up until 2010, they weren't in the direct provision system. They were staying in these kind of hostel types centres, unsupervised largely, most of them, definitely not 24-hour care, and no social workers. So they were extremely vulnerable. But, 400, and I can't remember, the number off the top of my head, but over 400 of those went missing of that 533. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Was it 500? And I'm just going to get this now because I'm just getting it wrong. But there was
as well.
But they went missing, and they were unaccounted for, and just basically, actually, because I was thinking about it earlier the week, I contacted TUSLA, and today they just said that. So sorry, just to explain. In 2010, everything changed. The Ryan report the year before had mentioned this cohort of kids or minors and said that they should be in kind of like foster care, proper residential centres, and so that's what happened. So there was a change in protocol, and the numbers of people who went missing, number of children or minors went missing, dropped drastically, but also the number of unaccompanied minors coming into the country also dropped drastically. So that should be said as well. But so just today, TUSLA said that they gave me the figures. So there's 28 have gone missing since 2010. So I don't know any more details. So we're still trying to find out maybe more of that. But just go back to the original figure I said. So of the 513 who went missing, 440 were still unaccounted for. So, but yeah, and so since 2010, since the change in policy where they were supposed to be either in foster care or better care, but 28 have still gone missing. So there you go. But up until 2010, like those kids wouldn't have been treated, or those minors wouldn't have been treated in the same way that an Irish child would have been treated had they gone missing from state care. They wouldn't have been put on the missing persons register. And the Children's Ombudsman in 2009, Emily Logan, was very alarmed at the manner in which, there was kind of not much done about it when a minor went missing. So anyway, just to... Well,
and Lucky, thanks so much for coming on tonight. It's great to talk to you about it all, and we'll do the thing for the phone cards for Christmas, hopefully. Yeah. I think that would be a decent campaign. I think
we tried it before, yeah.
Yeah, we were going to do it before, but we'll do it properly. I know there's a company that...
the company, Leica.
Yeah, Leica.
We did try them before, yeah.
We will get onto that. Tomorrow's papers, Olga.
Oh yeah,
great story there. Typical story. On the Examiner, sorry.
Oh, Olga, do you know how to share? Don't you do that?
I do, yeah. I'll just be 2 seconds. Sorry.
Okay, no problem at all. Thank you. The number of people the undocumented. Kevin, you mentioned 20,000. What kind of figure, Lucky, do you reckon? Sorry.
No, I'm not too sure. I can't put a figure on it.
Kevin?
It's very, very hard to put
I don't mean to be alarmist, but I think Lucky probably agrees with me. It is a significant number.
Yes, yeah. No, it is a huge number.
Yeah, you mentioned 20,000. Could it be? I mean,
it could be less. It could be more. I was aware because I did engage with various ad hoc groups who had difficulty in the employment sector in which they were engaged, and I got to know. For the most part, these were Asian young men, Pakistani, Indian, but not exclusively. And they were invited here with, if not to streets paved with gold, but certainly from the correspondence I saw, they appeared to be guaranteed long-term employment. That was not the case. Some of them were treated in the most appalling fashion, but as I say, fell through the crack. I'm lucky we'll bear this out with me. At the change of government at about 2011, and a number of things happened around that period. The cost of, if you wanted to for instance, if you were here in a work permit, you wanted to go home, suddenly the cost of a visa was costing twice as much, 3 times as much. The cost of a GNIB card sort of trebled overnight. Suddenly it was just astronomical. I mean, we were talking about 100 and 200% increases just to function, to keep your paperwork up to date.
Yeah.
And the bureaucracy became more stringent. At the same time, I will say this, in the period immediately following Shatter's entrance to the Department of Justice, Ines was given a boot up the arse, because there was suddenly a spurt, and certificates of naturalization were coming out at twice and 3 times the speed that they had in the previous 5 years. There was a movement. Now that seems to have abated again, but the pressure on people who were in the system here, economic pressure on them was greatly increased, and such that when they lost employment and were still had some time on their stamp to remain here and find alternative employment, economically it became impossible for them to engage somebody to help them with the bureaucracy, to pay the bureaucratic sort of taxes required. So that so many of them just literally gave up, fell through the floorboards, and really have been out there in the wilderness, as Lucky will tell you, for some considerable time. And these people are in a desperate state. They really are.
Okay. Well,
if you look into the Employment Act of 2013, didn't help issues as well. It came very, very hard. It's very, very hard. It's very, very strict. So if you're renewing the visa in accordance with that, you follow the requirements of that act. So that's another reason if a person had to renew the visa, because there's a huge amount now that a person must pay in order to get the visa renewed for employment purposes.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Lucky. Olga, just tomorrow's that's the Times Ireland edition. Is that the first? Is that the only Irish paper to come in?
We have that, and we have the Examiner.
Okay.
So they're on the Times there. So the top story there by Jennifer Bray: backlog forces women to wait 20 weeks for smear test results. So at the Public Accounts Committee today, there was HSE was there, and Damien McCallion basically said that there was a backlog of about 80,000 smear tests that are still being processed. So people are waiting up to 20 weeks. But I think this is, or the HSC are saying anyway, that more women were using the service in part because of the offer of the extra test. Remember when the cervical cancer check controversy broke out in April after Vicky Phelan's case. So, but further down it says that Alan Kelly, the Labour TD, was asking the HSE over claims that many of the 221 women affected by the scandal had not received their cervical slides back from the labs. HSE said that there had been 38 requests, of which 2 were outstanding, that the average turnaround time was 22 days. But Jennifer Bray is reporting that some women have said that they're waiting up to 70 days. And I know, further down then it says Catherine Murphy, the Social Democrats TD, has said that she had spoken to 3 women, and they're saying that they're waiting at least. One is saying that there are at least 50 women waiting since May. So that's not adding up there.
The splash will upset Bernard.
Why?
New deal plan will include new border in Irish. The DUP accuses May after leaked letter from number 10. Were you talking about this earlier?
We were.
John was. It was like the toy show for John.
Oh dear! Oh gosh. Okay. Let's the story.
Wipe the floor with me. Brexit. No deal plan will include new border in RC.
It's what Leo Varadkar suggested at one point in a kind of throwaway remark before. Now, the logic is, if you're going to have some kind of differentiation between the island of Ireland and Britain, do you have that border in Northern Ireland and disrupt essentially the whole EU and the Republic, or do you have it in the Irish Sea? Look, the DUP have not shown any particular expert knowledge on this, and one of the things about Brexit is that where it comes asunder is when it collapses under the weight of its own contradictions.
Yeah, but they are literally uncharted waters here now. We are in, isn't it? I mean, this is completely like we're redrawing maps here, as like boundary commission, practically.
Or rediscovering them as well. In the case of Rob, when he's just discovered 28 miles across the channel, there's this big landmass that's called France.
Poor Rob. God, he got
Bernard.
He's done for. Jeez. Okay, so.
Sorry, Bernard. Just on another note on Brexit. I don't. John's always pointing out to me how much older I am than he is, but
John and I are the same age.
Well, I'm sure you would, knowing more about British history than most British people. I think you probably remember or have some residual memory of Rebel Anguilla. Do you remember Rebel Anguilla send a gunboat?
Yes.
A small British protectorate in the Caribbean. Well, they have a difficulty. They remain a British protectorate. It has 15,000 inhabitants, all of whom have British passports. And they have not one border, but 2. One with the Dutch and one with the French.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to sort out their Brexit problems. And they've actually got a representative in London at the moment trying to explain to the Foreign Office that they exist, where they are, and where they can be found on the globe.
And Gibraltar has a similar difficulty. So, of course, do the Falklands. And at the moment, you've got to drive from the higher courts here, from the Privy Council to.
I don't want to hear about 1,800 sheep shaggers in the South Atlantic. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say those African and Caribbean, or those Caribbean countries that have High Commission, or rather the Privy Council as their Supreme Court. They're now looking to untangle the last bit of colonial government, and that is still working its way through Whitehall.
So the Windrush thing has affected more people than previously thought as well, hasn't it? I mean,
Absolutely. Windrush is the scandal of this year, and more people don't have their blood boiling at it, and it's now they're finding as it the same mentality has been extended to EU citizens who are here, and this cavalier notion that Irish people's rights are somehow protected by the common travel area is an absolute legal fallacy.
Okay. We're going to have you on, Bernard, again to talk to. We have to lock heads again. I think it's very important we do this. Sorry, Olga, is the Irish Examiner also?
The Examiner is there as well. Their lead is on Harris faces call for audit of doctors. So this is on the back of the comments made by the High Court Judge Peter Kelly this week about a junior doctor from Eastern Europe who was found to be working in a maternity unit here, and but there was big problems over his lack of basic medical competency. So essentially, yes, so Simon Harris is under pressure now to audit the number of rogue doctors, he's calling them, in the health system, amid fears that patients are being needlessly put at risk by unqualified doctors. So they're basically saying that, and also Sophia Crocona and Evelyn Ring, they're saying that they're reporting that the call for the investigation comes as the State Claims Agency has revealed that Ireland is facing more than 3,000 medical negligence cases due to serious errors, and that this includes 113 claims that are set to cost 10 million each.
Well, I'd say that, yeah. I mean, they're mostly done by qualified.
Quality of judges while we're at it, Mr. Kelly.
Well,
and then just there. Sorry, John.
Sorry. Please.
Oh yeah, the story there just by Stephen Rogers, and actually I think Ellen Coyne refers to it above in the Times as well. So 25% of GPs won't provide abortion service finds poll. So this is a poll by the Irish College of General Practitioners, and it's found that, like it says the headline, so 25% of GPs won't provide abortions. So
I would imagine that, given them, that would be, in reality, like a lot less.
Yeah. There's another, just a tiny slip there on Draghi quasi-monopoly in Irish banking. So by Eamon Quinn. So basically, I didn't see this, John. You might have been watching it, but Mario Draghi was.
I was.
Yeah. So he was in the European Committee, Finance Committee, and so anyway, what Eamon Quinn is reporting is a quasi-monopoly operates in Irish banking. And this is what Mario Draghi said, and essentially what he goes on to report here is that Draghi is saying that the benefits of a banking union will lead to more competition in time.
In John's account, Olga, Draghi was wearing a top hat, a cape, and twirling his moustache as he cackled evilly.
Yeah, as opposed to...
John is drooling like this has been John's favourite show.
Touche, Bernard, touche.
Quasi-monopoly. I would have thought complete monopoly. What was there before before the crash? It was a monopoly. I mean, and we've been in Europe 30, God knows, 40, 50 years, nearly.
Almost 50 years.
And yet, these systemic problems within our country are just seem to be shocking.
Well, if you
outsiders.
look at Allied Irish Bank and the Insurance Corporation of Ireland debacle, where the government actually stepped in to rescue it back in 1983, that had nothing to do with the EEC. That had everything to do with Ireland being a great little country for scandals to protect a certain elite.
Yeah, well, why doesn't the EU step in then on those occasions, Bernard? I think
it wasn't the EU then either; it was the EEC.
The EEC. Well, there's another bank about to go, so watch the space, gentlemen.
And there's a German bank that is undergoing some very unwelcome scrutiny at the moment, and its involvement in a couple of things.
Okay.
I think I know who we're talking about there too.
Yes.
Yeah. Olga, is any?
Sorry, they're the only Irish papers we have.
Oh, the midterms and the Trump and the aftermath of the Trump thing. I think we're just we've kind of run out of time. And Vanessa, I'd love to have got your take on all of that, but
on Trump.
Yeah, on the midterms and
we have plenty more.
Okay, we'll have plenty more time.
Well, Vanessa, I think it was Chris Mullen paraphrased a quote that was originally said about Nixon earlier today, when he said that Trump is the president of all those towns that don't have bookshops.
Now you see,
now
this is mocking the everyday person.
Our gratitude to Kevin Higgins. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us. Kevin is the legal advisor to the Tomb Homes Survivors Group.
And a man you do not fall out with.
Oh, God, no. Lucky Kabula, Lucky from sunny Arklow.
Yeah.
Wet Arklow.
Thank you.
Movement of asylum seekers in Ireland. Thank you very much, Lucky. And we'll be in touch regarding the appeal and the campaign, and we'll try and get that up and going before Christmas. Cronin from the Sheet, thank you so much for joining us. Neil Curran, we lost Neil, so we don't have any movies to watch this week. And Vanessa, any tips for the movies?
No, I was no.
Okay.
Mirai is very good. It's a Japanese anime. It's absolutely gorgeous. Part of the new wave. Saw it the other evening with my family. Mirai. It's a Japanese word for future, but it's this toddler who becomes very jealous of his newborn baby sister, and it's a mixture of fantasy, takes it, but also modernism, and it's actually really, and the people aren't tropes or stereotypes in it. It is a modern Japanese. It's family. It's well worth watching, just for the design, for the imagery, and also for the story.
And all ages as well. It's not
all ages.
So, anime. It's called Miro. M-I-O.
Mirai. M-I-R-A-I. The Japanese word for future.
For future. Okay. Well, that's
poor Nate. First the book slot down. Bernard's taken over.
Okay. And well, thank you very much, Bernard. Bernard Purcell. Bernard is editor of the Irish World. I recommend you get a copy of it if you're in Britain this week. And
we sell in Ireland too.
Oh,
we're big in Gort.
You're big in Gort. Okay. Is that is that a Brazilian thing?
No, it's more hurling to do with hurling in Kilburn.
London, yeah.
Oh, okay. Bernard, thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see you very, very soon. And Vanessa, celebrity accountant Vanessa Foran, thank you so much. We didn't get a chance to have a chat, but we'll talk next week and we'll discuss Trump and everything, and possibly The Rock and whatnot. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the side.
Oh, he'd be a great Democratic candidate now. He'd beat Trump, wouldn't he? Yeah. The Rock and O'Rourke. What do we think of that ticket, folks?
Who's the O'Rourke? Which one's O'Rourke?
You talk about the one Cruz beat in Texas.
Oh,
well, he's got the money.
A very expensive campaign.
Yeah,
Cruz should have been beaten, really. I mean, to be fair now, if this blue wave had ever got its act together.
Yeah, but see, Cruz is a fantastic campaigner. He's brilliant. He's relentless.
A neighbor of mine is acting in a film with The Rock, and he says, and my daughter's hugely jealous of him, but he says he's an absolutely lovely man.
Wow.
He's a lovely man. There you go now.
Was that deliberate now?
Separation of that.
There you go. On that bombshell.
Deliberate?
Well, we'll try and get an autograph or at least a phone number to him.
We'll get a selfie.
Okay, so everybody, thank you so much. Bernard, everybody, Kevin, Olga, and Marcel and Luke. They didn't show up. Or Johnny. Okay. We'll see you all next week. Okay. Bye now.
Good night.